I recently attended Sphere by Atmos to sit down with some of the presenters on the day for one-on-one interviews and to meet with people attending to find out what brought them there and what they learnt from the day. Over the next few weeks, we'll be releasing these conversations to the public, providing rare insights into the state of cybersecurity and risk for Australia, New Zealand, and on a more global scale. We'll find out exactly what moving beyond just the responsive moment of crisis actually looks like. Stay tuned. Joining me now is Reece Corbett-Wilkins, Head of First Response Australia and is the Chief Strategy Officer at Atmos, as well as I'm joined with Leah Pinto, Director Cyber Intelligence at CyberCX. Thank you both for joining and welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thanks, KB.
Okay, so we're at the end of that Sphere. You're obviously on a hype. Today was amazing. A lot of good energy in the room that I noticed and I observed. But tell me, what were your key insights from across the day, Leah?
Me? There was a lot. It was really good vibes. I am absolutely exhausted, but also pretty pumped. Like, it was a really cool vibe, great speakers, great presenters, a lot of really heavy topics tackled, but the audience was huge, right? How many people did you have?
1,500.
1,500 people. So for a cybersecurity conference, it was epic. The key themes across the day, God, there were many. I think for me, the key themes that came out was a lot about collaboration, that we all need to work together to tackle the issues. We had everyone from lawyers to tech to CISOs. We also had media in the room. And we're all fighting the same fight, but we're fighting it slightly differently. And it's almost like we're speaking different languages in a way to get to the same end goal. So that was a really good insight for me. It gave me a lot of comfort in the industry. We're tackling some big problems, but it was really cool to see everyone fighting in the same objectives.
Reece?
Heaps and heaps and heaps that we covered today. You've probably picked up that we set ourselves a very ambitious target, which was to try and change the entire industry's mindset, or what we were calling the center of gravity, from being fixated on the moment of crisis and instead much more focused on the resilience, the before, not after boom. And we conceptually try to work out, okay, well, how do we do that in one day? And to Leah's point, a big part of it was getting the right speakers. And interestingly, when we spoke to all the different people that you invite to these things, they saw the vision. They all just saw the vision and they're like, I want in on that. I want to be on stage on that day when our industry has that defining moment. That's the speakers. The audience members showed up with heaps of energy.
Okay.
1,500 entities, 1,500 guests, 800 different entities, 100 ASX listed, small business representatives, everyone in between. So like you had a really broad church.
Sure.
And I think that gave us that ability to kind of then reflect on what, if so much makes us different, what makes us the same? And we came back to this point of like, we're all humans, which is ultimately the conclusion that we landed on, as the kind of the call sign for what is going to drive that mindset at a national level. And then I think the last thing for me was, Leah, you kind of touched on it, which was there was some like big, heavy conversations that we all kind of at the end of it just like didn't know what to say, just had to take a big breath. And I think that showed the enormity of the problem.
It's like a gravity of our
Gravity,
jobs.
Yeah. It's like this elephant that we know we can't eat in one, we don't even know where to start eating it, to be frank. But I have hope, to your point, Leah, like I too agree. Like I've hoped that when you have that convergence of people all with that same intent to change things over time or even in the short term, that's where we'll start to see success.
So talk to me more about the vision. What do you think, so obviously you've done this year, what do you think sort of moving forward for the rest of 2026 and then into next year?
Are you going to top it next year?
I don't know, is the honest answer. I'm hoping I hope it'll be like a sit rep, like a report on progress. You know, how do we go, Steve?
Yeah. Get the audience members to be the presenters to see what did they do in the last 12 months to achieve our objectives.
As much as I love being on stage with you, Leah, it was so much fun. I was actually, to me, it was actually the highlight was being on stage with you. But yeah, next year, I want to be in the audience and watch them do it, you know?
It was fun. And, you know, cybersecurity conferences traditionally aren't fun. I'm not a technical person and I generally fall asleep when it gets too techy. But the topics were just so interesting and engaging. And I looked around the room, and you often see people on their phones in these sort of conferences. Everyone was fully engaged, and you could almost see those brain bubbles of people really thinking. That's what when I say it was heavy, that's what I mean. There was some big concepts tackled, some big issues, and some big proposals on how do we move forward together as an industry. It was really cool to see those light bulb moments for people, whether they be people on stage or us when we were talking, but the audience. It was awesome.
I particularly enjoyed, they're all great sessions, and if I try to single out one, I'm just playing favourites.
You did at the start though.
I know, I did. I did.
What is that then?
Well, actually, I love the data one because I'm a data nerd, and I think that we've got a data problem, which is if we don't actually fundamentally know the size of the problem that we're trying to fix, then we can't fix it. But I'm gonna change my mind, and I'm keen to hear what your favourite one was. Actually, I'm gonna change my mind. There was a session, and this could either have gone really well or not well at all. So it was a bit of a punt, but it was essentially you have a journalist, you have a CISO, you have a director, and then you have a litigator walk into a bar, right? And try to get them to talk about their perspectives on life, and hopefully start thinking that they're like complete opposite ends, but at the end of it realize they're best friends. So I either thought it was going to end up in a fisticuff or them holding hands. And I think we got pretty close to the holding hands.
Close to both. It kept swinging.
Actually, that is true. There were moments I was worried. But I think the point which you made, which is whether you're a litigator, funding class actions to hold companies accountable for wrongdoing,
Okay.
whether you are a CISO who's responsible for safeguarding the gate, whether you are a director who's responsible for governance, or indeed whether you're a journalist who's trying to report on public affairs. We all fundamentally agree that they all have the same intent and want to see a world be the same as an outcome. It's just how they do it in their day-to-day trade and the conversations they have, and to your point, the language they speak is different. And that's what makes them feel like they're different, but in fact, they're actually much more similar than they first thought.
So I'm going to agree with that. And when we went through the agenda, you were so excited, like, this is going to be such a great session. I looked at it, I was like, it's cool, but it's not my jam. But that was my light bulb moment, because a lot of the other topics, I know a bit about, I've talked to people about, and I speak to execs and boards all the time about this stuff, but I speak in my language. But listening to that was the moment where I went, oh, wow, like all of the aligned industries want the same thing.
Which is just a safer world, or just a clearer world that we operate in. Like, what are the rules of engagement? What happens to our data when we give it to a tech company in the US? What happens when we click that thing? It's just...
What's our social responsibility around people's data and harm, and how do we report on that?
How do we educate our kids and the next generation about misuse of technology or technology harms when we ourselves don't even understand the technology or the harms like this? So I think this is my point about it came back to real human issues, which is like we're all human and we just want to be safe and we just want to be comfortable.
So going back to the bar example, who was the most intense? The journo, the litigator?
I think they all had that.
You're saying from experience.
Litigator.
I think he was the
Yeah, that's because of your background.
Yeah, okay.
Not the CISO?
So we had a fill-in, which was John Moran, because somebody couldn't make it because of the Middle East and the flight delays. He was talking more on the perspective of speaking to CISOs and speaking to directors. I think his perspective was really interesting because he was kind of independent and a little bit objective of everybody else and their own kind of personal views. I mean, look, it's Patrick Gray, right? Like, that guy's cyber royalty. To have him even here and saying anything was just a privilege. But he was incredibly insightful about so many different things. And in particular, he was kind of talking about this, how do we make cyber sexy? Or how do we make certain really nuanced, discrete issues, such as this concept of the digital duty of care, which is what they were talking about. How do we
You're going to nerd out and
I am
go
going to
lawyer.
I know. I'm setting myself up now. How do we make that sexy? Because unfortunately, it doesn't sell. And so we can't make these like really complex topics mainstream unless we either simplify it or find a connection to the human being, the human condition.
But I think Waleed Ali picked it up in the end when he was talking about his impression of the media, saying, I think media and journalists care about this stuff, but the industry isn't set up for it to take the time to understand the technical nuances and what that actually means to then report on it. So I thought that was really, how do we make this mainstream to understand that cybersecurity is important from everyone, from the big end of town, critical infrastructure organisations, to the mums and dads that are trying to teach their kids not to use social media. Don't send photos on apps that you don't know who the owner of the app is or where the data's going. So that was for me quite interesting, and it really is that education journey.
I want to talk about our dynamic on the stage, the three of us. We tried something new this year, and I was told by a lot of people to say, hey, don't do it. It's too much risk. It's the first year. So having three people on stage as the MC, but also we weren't really MCing. I mean, that was part of the role, which is up next. And
we were the voice of the
we were
audience.
the voice of reason, yeah. We're the voice of the
that
audience.
too.
Well, I tried to be.
Yeah.
It was fun. Like, I think just having, I mean, Waleed being there, obviously, it's Waleed. He's an outsider. He's not a subject matter expert, but he could take it all in and then kind of like wrap it up and then give it back to us as a gift. And everyone was just like completely like, that's a really interesting and unique perspective that helps us understand some of these topics and connect them. But I don't know, Leah, I just had so much fun with you, like us bouncing with each other, bringing our own personal lives, our professional lives to it. It was fun.
It was fun.
Yeah, it was fun.
I did go into the day thinking, how much can I heckle you on stage
I was waiting for it.
to get
I
it
was
right?
ready.
But we agreed on everything.
I know, yeah. Well, some things, mostly.
So I want to know, you said before, Patrick Gray, the question was, how do you make the industry sexy? So what came out of that?
Oh, geez. What came out of that?
So I think, I mean, you made the point, right? Which is, it's not that journalists don't care. It's just that they've got a job and they've got to find something that, hits with the audience or hits with their producers' requirements. But, not talking you up here, KB, but, that's why what you do is so helpful and instrumental. And I think it's how do we make, probably the short answer is his kind of advice was, how do we leverage the tech media that clearly does love this stuff, like really, really dial into the tech media, and then try to somehow potentially aggregate that into mainstream. And I think if you can find that, then you find issues that are relevant to the people in that room will be relevant to everybody. So as an example, I talked a lot about today about like the whole dysfunction at the moment with the US government and the AI companies. And, that's something that we all, I can see you nodding, like, we all know that. But if you go and speak to your next door neighbor, they'll be like, what are you on about? Right? It's how do you take that into the realm of public?
Waleed said something at the end of the day where he said it wasn't it's something issue. It was did he say connected issue? When he summed up the issue of cyber and the issue that we're battling, it was like a society issue. But he used really powerful words. Don't know what that was. I can't remember. But it was really powerful because having an outsider looking in going like, this is a real issue for everybody. We live and breathe this stuff and we will talk about it all the time. But I don't know about you, but everyone that I speak to just glazes over when we talk about this stuff. I can't even get family members to change your passwords. So to have these kind of topics to be mainstream and have conversations at barbecues and at home. And I think we shifted a couple of years ago when people were impacted, when we had our awareness moments with Medibank Latitude and Optus, but people were paying attention, but it's how do we take it to the next level to set up the next generation and protect Australia's interests.
And I think the analogy which I loved at the end was it's in the air and we're all breathing it. We just don't kind of realize it. And I almost had this moment of like,
that's what I was trying to think.
I almost had this moment of like, it's asbestos in the air. It's like, we're all actually like suffering from asbestosis, but don't realize because it's this.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, his point, which is if we can somehow connect it to the human condition, make it relevant, then you'll get that impact.
But to us, it is.
It is, yeah.
It's blatantly connected to the human condition, whether it be the harm from sensitive data or the operational disruption of a hospital, for example. Yeah. To us, it is, but that's not everybody else's perspective that doesn't live in this industry.
I'm going to come back to the moment about something that also we picked up about, which is like, how do you connect the dots between it's not relying on the government or not relying on business, it's everybody's mission. But before I do, I'm going to come back to your point, which is I can't get my friends to hear me at a barbecue and take care of what I do, right? I brought my wife today. She's a teacher, has nothing to do with cyber, but I brought her today, mainly for support, cheerleader squad. But like, I think we need to find those opportunities, genuinely. We need to find those opportunities of bringing kind of newcomers into these situations. I don't know, maybe you'll
I said to you earlier. So I did some Channel 9 media earlier this week and I got my hair done for today, obviously. And my friend is my hairdresser and she said, oh my God, I watched you on the news. I had no idea what you were saying. I didn't understand it. All I took away was I need to change my passwords. And I was like, yes, that's okay. Like sometimes, I don't know about you, but I talk to a lot of people about this stuff and sometimes I think, am I really making a difference when I'm saying the same things over and over again? Then you have those sort of moments where you go, yes, I got through in a way that matters to you. And I think from the faces of the audience and the response from the audience, particularly when we were walking around the vendor area after, I think there was a lot of those moments for people, even within this industry, which is really cool and impactful for the rest of the community. Because like you challenged everyone to take it back and have those conversations with people that aren't here today. So I think it's going to have that ripple effect. So next year has to be better, obviously. You have to top it. But I'm really looking forward to seeing that ripple effect of change.
Yeah, same. And I didn't want this just to be a conference of good chats. Like we really motivated.
Lots of good chats.
I mean, there were great chats. We really motivated people to take action. And I know that that's a conference theme and what are the 5 takeaways? And, that's just how every conversation ends. But like today, we really put a stake in the ground and said, these are the 10 things that if we can do this as an industry next year, we will move forward years. So we did actually put a lot on the table. And the other takeaway, sorry, you mentioned before about it's everybody's business kind of theme in terms of cybersecurity. What I found a couple of the speakers like Chris Krebs in particular made it so painstakingly obvious is, of course, government has an incredibly important role to manage cybersecurity for our nation.
Right.
They have access to information and intel and connections and systems and servers and that only they have access to, right? So there is absolutely a place to play for them. But what my mindset shift was, Chris Krebs, being ex-CISA, was saying, actually, you don't realize how much the government needs you, needs the business community to play their part, needs organizations to report to the ACSC if they have an incident so that they can get information that they don't have access to, match it against what they do have and start to understand patterns in the noise and all the rest of it. And I thought that was actually interesting because I think in Australia, we generally have a pretty good Team Australia approach when it comes to like reporting to government, for example. But there's definitely still underreporting. There's definitely still pockets. There's definitely, so I think that for me was a bit of a takeaway was we actually probably do have more power and responsibility and opportunity to make a difference as organizations than we think.
Sure. And you know what's interesting, because I met a lot of people that I interviewed today, like doing 2 or 3 in a session. So there was probably like 20 plus. And I think the main undertone was how do we break the barriers with working with government, getting away from like, oh, mum and dad, you're the police. Because historically and traditionally people would fear. I still kind of do, to be honest. But I think I'm seeing that ripple through now. That's like, okay, we're going to have a conversation. We're going to work with you. And I think that really stood out from a media perspective for me today.
I think it's the evolution of the industry. So I started in government and I started in cyber in government and then moved to the private sector. But when I started in government cyber, it was a very different operating environment. And we didn't have people wanting to talk to us and we really had to work on that trust and relationship building. And I think that comes to one of my other key themes is around trust. But I think we're at a point where not only does the government understand that they need those partnerships, they need the private sector, but the perspectives the private sector have, I know you do and we do, we work on incidents. We get a lot of insights and intelligence that we can share to help the rest of the community, regardless of what sector you're in. I just want to pick up on one thing, and you sort of touched on, which was my other main takeaway, is around context. I am an intelligence professional through and through, so I will talk any chance I can get around the value of information and intelligence sharing. But I think what came out for me today, context, but not the static context where the goalposts keep changing, and particularly when Mike Rogers was that panel that was on was around the geopolitical context shifting so dramatically. And we can talk about that, and we have been talking about it for the last 12, 18 months, 4 years, a couple of weeks ago since Russia-Ukraine broke out. But we can really conceptualize that the goalposts change, the context that we work within changes. And not only in our room, but in the engine rooms when they were talking about cybercrime and the evolution of a hacker, that context is changing. The ecosystem, whether it be on the digital, technology, the regulatory landscape was touched on. See why I say it was very heavy? Like I feel like we tackled so much, but a lot of that comes back to understanding the context that you're operating within and continually reviewing that.
Okay, so the universal theme was the question, what are you doing in 2026?
How long have I got?
So what's that sort of like for you, or what came up when you're asking people in the audience and stuff like that? I know it's, people can share that with you, but was there anything that stood out for you perhaps?
Yeah, I'm going to try and keep this brief because he's probably got a podcast episode in every one of these points. The first wish, on my wish list. Okay. The first is, can we get alignment on the data? So when I say small business, I mean $10 million less of revenue, in my view, but that's very different to everybody else. So when someone says 65% of small businesses got impacted by ransomware, are we even talking about the same group of businesses? If we don't have the same definition of small business, then we're all applying different things to that. So data, Second point is connectedness. And this comes back to the power of leveraging each other's strengths and ability, their capabilities. So it's that scaling point. And we've realized now that if you got all the cyber people in a room and got them to work together, you'd have massive scale. But then add to that the cyber lawyers, and then add to that the cyber insurers, and then add to that the incident response industry.
You're very loud. Be a very loud room.
No one would. Everyone would talk way too much. But imagine if you brought them all together. You got this collision of power forces. And anyway, my point on that was, how do you harness the ecosystem? The third point is cyber insurance itself. We've openly put submissions online as part of Horizon 2 to mandate cyber insurance for small businesses. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't think it's going to happen. It's too hard to push through quickly. There's upsides, downsides, considerations, issues. But my fundamental starting point on it is small businesses shouldn't have the choice to be able to buy cyber insurance in the same way they need workers' health comm, in the same way they need other things too, because they just can't afford to protect themselves or respond to cyber incidents. And that burden shouldn't be put on individuals whose data is breached.
Sure.
It's that simple. Now, not everyone agrees with me. That's fine. Read my submissions. You can have a chat about it. The fourth point...
I will not be doing that.
That's a good submission, I assure you, if I say so myself. My fourth point, and this is probably the biggest thing that I took away, was we need to actually change our entire fundamental assumptions around how we view this issue. So the thing that I loved about today, the thing that all the topics talked about was, today at Sphere, we gave everybody permission to think really big, to think really drastically, to plan out what worst case scenario is and work backwards from that position. Because I don't think as a business sector, we've actually given ourselves permission to dream, permission to fear, permission to use context. And the context that we're talking about even just this week has fundamentally changed that of last week. So I think that needs to happen. And then lastly, I'm sorry.
Sorry, I was going to say, it's not that you gave permission as well, but you actually gave space for it. Yes. So I think that's underplaying it by saying we gave people permission to do that, because you created the space and the markers for people to be able to direct their thinking.
Yeah. And also said this year is about creating space for you to do it, but next year it's probably going to ramp up. Like, we don't see change. It's going to be more of a you need to do, not a you should and can do. And then look, lastly, the point is just we kind of said, are there any buttons that we can push or levers that we can pull to kind of fix the situation? And we kind of came back to this point of the role of the media. I think the media can do more. I know we just talked about it earlier, so I don't want to rehash it, but we have allies that aren't cybersecurity people that can help us with our mission. Mm-hmm. One example is the media. We just need to tap into that. We need to find those opportunities. If we're going to scale, what's the loudest microphone? What's the loudest? Where's the marketplace? Where's the soapbox I can stand on? Where's the opportunity to get these messages clearly out to the people that need to hear it? That's my big thing for hopefully between now and next year.
Wow. No, I was just thinking, because I was talking to Steph Lurs before, and she's like, you did the podcast with the former CISO of Medibank. And one of the things that he spoke about was the dissemination and disinformation from mainstream media people. But I was like, well, how can they understand these concepts? And they're going to write stories quickly. So I do understand why there is that gap from that perspective. I mean, if you said, go and report on mining incidents, I have no idea. So I think that it's how do we close that gap, because then it does engender fear and distrust within just everyday people. How do you solve that problem? I'm still not sure, but I think that's what you guys are sort of talking about here today.
I don't have an answer how to solve it, but I think there is an approach, and it has to be bottom up and top down. So it's teaching everyday people. If it's the barbecue conversation, I don't know what you're like with your kids, but my poor son, he was using an app that had vulnerabilities in it. I was like, have you read the privacy policy? My 10-year-old laughs at me. He's 10. No. And my whole family laughs at me. But then the next time he comes back, and there's all these new apps floating around now with the social media ban. He said, Mum, there's this new app. I said, mate, we need to have a conversation. He goes, no, Mum, I researched it and I looked at the privacy policy. And I'm like, that is a moment. That is a win. So when I say top, bottom, up, that's the kind of conversations. But then there needs to be that high level. And as a government, we've got a lot of high-level views, perspectives. It is on the agenda, and there are a lot of neighbouring nations where it's not on the agenda as much. So it's on the agenda there, but how do we bring that together to reach an entire population?
Got it. And so a couple of questions for you both. For those who are unable to join your Sphere today, what what's going to be coming down the pipe next year? I know you said it's going to be bigger and better and
You missed out.
all the
That's
stuff,
the
and there's going to be
summary.
circus performers and everything. But what can people expect from next year at a high level?
What,
And you're going to commit on it now.
what our commitment is between now and next year
Yes.
is we've done a podcast with an awesome podcaster. Her name's KB. You should meet her sometime.
Oh, that's
Because we want to give assets that capture the moments back to the community.
Yeah, I liked that. That was really cool when you said that. I didn't know you were doing that. Super
So I hope that people actually make use of this podcast and actually take it back to their organisation, train their staff, get board approval for budget, etc. So that's the first thing. Let's keep momentum, right?
Got it.
I and our team, there's a big team behind us, we start our planning in about July. We kind of watch the current affairs of the world between July and October and start to get a bit of a feel for what would be relevant in March. There is a huge amount of guesswork and you kind of hope it all just lands. So I think the short answer is
context.
context.
Right.
I would love to hear feedback from people that were here today, what worked well, what didn't work well, and also like in your conversations that you have in the next 3 months with businesses, where are you getting stuck? Because I have a feeling that next year's going to be like a bit of a sit rep, as I said, of what do we say that we did last year? What did we agree to do as an industry? Where are we up to and where we're struggling? And maybe this just becomes like the platform for the next 5 years. It's just like continually pushing us forward under this.
It's like accountability.
Yeah,
It's creating accountability to the industry and attendees to do what they say they're going to do.
And I
Do what
think-
they've been challenged to do.
And I think everyone today kind of did that like 3, 2, 1 hut. You had this moment of like everyone agreed that we're all on the same path. But I think we do need to find, we found clarity now in the issue. We need to find clarity in the solution. I think that's the missing piece.
Yeah.
What would you like to see next year if you could do this all over again?
I think it comes back to when you say, you're watching the environment and the context. I think a lot can change in that July to September. We're in a very unpredictable state, whether it be geopolitically or with the rise of AI, that I think we could say something now and in 6 months' time there could be a major incident, there could be major technological development or something geopolitically could shift significantly that could throw the plan out the window. But I think
I almost did this week. We almost lost like 10 speakers.
I think for me, it would be like see the next step of preparedness. You challenge people about what are you doing to improve cyber resiliency in your organisation. I'd like to see the accountability of that. I'd like to see the stories on how that has been achieved and the success stories. I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm often doom and gloom when I talk these sort of things, and I really try to create but we've got this team, like, yay, but we did that. So what's next? Where can we sort of measure success and what that looks like?
I don't know that we'll be able to pull off a 2-day conference because there's pros and cons. I think a 1 day is just like bite size and punchy and everyone loves it and then goes home and has a shower from all the heaviness. I think we need to work out how to get this to like other jurisdictions, like New Zealand, for example. We both do a lot of work in New Zealand. You were there last week. They are, a few years behind us in terms of their cyber maturity generally, and like they love Australia in the sense that they can learn from, where are we a little bit ahead and where's our thinking a little bit further ahead and what can they do to rapidly implement that so that they can come up quickly. I'd love to see how do we make the most of this in New Zealand. And then like you say, context, like they've got issues that are specific to them that aren't specific to us. So I can't commit to another conference right now, but it's our intent to do this every year. So I hope that we can, and we look forward to doing it again next year with everybody.
And really quickly, final thoughts. Leah?
I need a wine.
And Reece?
Chris said, I'm going to give you all something to drink about today, so listen up. And it's a fair shout, which is we just tackled a huge amount. I mean, we're both exhausted. We had a great day. I just hope everybody enjoyed it. And Leah, as I say, like that was fun, man.
Yeah, it was fun.
I hope to do something cool with you again like that. So
Yeah, it's good fun. Thanks for having me.
All right, I think it's time to get the wine / beer.
thanks, KB.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Joining me now in person is Anthony Cooke, partner at Atmos New Zealand, and James Blakely, the head of government relations at Atmos, and of course, Michael Boyd, director at ASD. In this session, we are discussing why the government can be your friend and a facilitator, not just the fun police. So gentlemen, thanks for joining me and welcome.
Hello, thanks for having us.
Okay, so in a large breach, how can the government assist organisations with recovery? And that's sort of been the undertone a lot today, depending on who we've been interviewing. But who would like to answer that first?
Yeah, very happy to answer this one. So I guess the government can help everybody to recover from an incident through either providing like great tailored advice and assistance to fill in some gaps that they might have, as well as so we have our National Office of Cybersecurity who can help coordinate across all of government for when there's responsibilities there that you might need to achieve. And we've found that engagement with a lot of the arms of government, not just the regulatory arms, but the government, parts of government that do want to help you recover from those incidents, has shown great benefits, quicker times to recovery for people, and that quick exchange of information with those entities as well has actually helped entities recover really fast.
I think we've had a lot to do with the NOx and with ASD as well, and I think like Australia's potentially leading the rest of the world in that coordination role that they provide. It's it's incredibly noisy when you're working through an incident without having multiple arms of government coming in, and for them the most important question is one that they want answered straight away. When you've got 50, 60, 70, 80 of those questions coming in, it just makes a lot of noise for the response. And so with the Department of Home Affairs, with the National Office Cybersecurity, like coming in and buffering those agencies that are needing information, but consolidating that and bringing that down through one pipeline to the business to consider and then provide advice to is a massive help. And then of course with the ASD as well, it's information sharing is probably one of the most powerful pieces to respond but then also prevent. And there's an amount of information that can be used from both parties as well. So we see great value with Australia leading the rest of the world with that coordination support.
Yeah, I'd echo that. From a New Zealand perspective, we do not have that coordination perspective, and it really shows, also being qualified in Australia and New Zealand and working in New Zealand, I can see that distinction in real time and how that works. What the government is really good at, including in New Zealand, is providing intelligence and some support. You do feel that collaboration. Unfortunately, it's a little bit of a one-way street when I look at New Zealand. When an organisation shares intelligence, there's no protections in relation to that information being used against that organisation, which as a lawyer makes it tricky, right? Because I can't give them any comfort around assurance or confidentiality, which hopefully you would expect. But without that sort of framework in place, it does limit the ability to collaborate. So when I see what's happening in Australia, and I do think it is leading the charge, and I'm sure it will be adopted in New Zealand at some point if those discussions are not already happening.
Yeah, and so that's the limited use disclosure obligations. So that's legislated restrictions on what information can be used and how by government, and so it's a great step forward in a more mature model than relying on the traffic light protocol, which is voluntary. So that helps us have a greater degree of confidence that the information that's being provided is going to be used for the right purpose, that kind of minimises the risk on the company when it provides it, and it just facilitates the information sharing.
And to bring an example to light, I was working for a trans-Tasman business, was advising the New Zealand board. Without those frameworks in place, we did not tell the government anything about the ransomware event or any of the IOCs. But the Australian arm of the business, they reported the ransom, told them the amount, gave them all the details, and also the IOCs, because they had that comfort in place. And that was just a sharp contrast. And I think part of that comes from different cultures. So looking at how the Australia and New Zealand contrast a little bit, Australia doesn't have the same high trust in government. Traditionally speaking, when I compare that to New Zealand, so it might have been that these frameworks have been developed to promote collaboration and it works, whereas in New Zealand we traditionally have a high trust in government, so the government has been able to rely on, to some extent, people voluntarily sharing information, but I think with the market maturing and the compensation culture of cyber risks coming to life, it's becoming a little bit increasingly problematic, especially for large organisations.
I think we've actually got a really good example of that trust that's built from around limited use. We've had an incident reported to us. Originally, they were very standoffish in regards to what was happening and the type of information they were sharing. We sat down and explained what limited use would be, protections that provide, what the information could be used for. And first we did it in the legal jargon terms, and then we actually explained it in probably layman's terms that they actually understood. And after we did that, you could actually physically see them relieved that they were talking to someone who was going to protect their information, not use it for punitive measures. And they actually shared a lot more than we thought they would. And it was great because we were then able to actually say, oh, from that what you shared, actually this is your issue, this is where you need to, what you need to do, and they actually recovered. So it was really great, great experience.
So then, Michael, on that note, what I'm hearing a lot from people I've interviewed today is there's a lot of those barriers being broken with like industry and government. Like historically, people were afraid, maybe to your earlier point, it's not quite there yet. Are you seeing that change then over time, where people are being a lot more like collaborative, whereas before it did feel like the police, and I think people were maybe worried about that and apprehensive about coming forward, perhaps, or being slapped on the wrist?
Yeah, I think I guess historically we've always seen government as the fun police, but I think more and more now we're seeing everyone's getting out there. Everybody like cybersecurity is becoming norm, right? Breaches are becoming a norm nowadays. You see it in the news every other week, every other day, and I think a lot of our organisations, ASD as well as the NOCs, are getting out there and communicating that we're here to help. We want to help you. We want to protect your information, etc., like that. So I think yes, it's slowly starting to turn around. People being more collaborative, people being more friendly. And overall, I think it's good. And a lot of themes today, a lot of the panels talked about that as well. Yeah.
Okay, so then moving on in terms of prevention, are governments globally, and perhaps a focus on Australia and New Zealand, doing enough to provide the required support? Maybe Anthony, you can start.
I think maybe more with the New Zealand focus, but it also applies to Australia, is our economy is highly dependent on offshore services, whether it's cloud services. There are limited local options to go with. I think more leadership in how these local businesses are managing those contractual arrangements and those protections, and understanding how this data is being looked after, or whatever services security controls are in place to protect the viability of those systems needs to occur. At the moment, it's a little bit, well, if my provider had an incident and they had a cyber breach, that's just annoying for me. Whereas rather we need to shift the conversation where they need to take ownership of using those suppliers in the first place. And of course, it's a race to without a legislative framework, it's a race to the bottom of pricing, because you're just going to go for the quickest option, least security controls, etc. Whereas if there were minimum standards, we'd start to see, some better decision making about which suppliers should fall in a supply chain of an organisation.
And then perhaps what about coming out of Australia?
I think the government's doing quite well. There's obviously always an opportunity for improvement. Government has the same challenges as what businesses do, right? There's only so much money, and there's competing priorities for that. Here in Australia, they've got Horizon 2 coming out, which is starting to look at further down the supply chain and those smaller businesses, and that is going to have a tangible uplift and bring along the people in the supply chain. I think it's not just government though. It's really difficult. We're also seeing the challenges where, and topical, but we've got Anthropic and we've got the US government, and it kind of comes into the government used to be the 600-pound gorilla in the room, and they got what they wanted. They're not anymore, and we're seeing that on a large scale now in the last couple of weeks, but historically as well. To Anthony's point, we rely on these global SaaS providers, and the government isn't able just to muscle in the terms that it thinks is relevant. So I think there's a piece of business to do as well, and to commit to the social ledger and bring their actions up in line with what's expected. And then lastly as well, then it's great if government is the judge and the jury and the executioner, they write the legislation and set the standards as they can, and then businesses come to the party. Well, we need individuals as well also to think about, I'm the last piece of that pie. I'm going to be more responsible. I'm going to better educate myself about these risks, and then I'm going to deliver on that. So all three pieces of the pie come together.
With you're right, like Horizon 2's coming out soon, we did get a lot of feedback on that in regards to the supply chains, small businesses, etc., that we should be focusing on to, like they're the underbelly of how a lot of our organisations work here. For what government's currently doing, we are like ASD cross-sectoral exercises to actually get people to exercise their preparedness for a catastrophic incident or something like that. The docs also runs their sectorial exercises to help people there. We're continually pushing out our advice to areas so that they understand the risks that might be out there, what they need to do as well. So especially with supply chains, third parties like ASD will be doing some campaigns to talk about that, what entities, small businesses can do as well. So I think, Australia's government's doing a good amount in this space. There is more that will come out as part of Horizon 2. But I think it's also the Australia as a whole needs to kind of get behind this and realise that cyber incidents will occur, and we need to try and prepare ourselves as much as possible.
Yeah, I think like coming out with last week as well with the directive under the PSPF is actually really helpful, right? Like it sets a clear message that you need to patch this or address this incident, right? So even if you're not, sitting in under PSPF, you're going to take note of that, and because the risk is real. If it's big enough risk for those entities, it's big enough for us, and then that's going to like affect the change. So I think that was fantastic coming out for that directive.
And then will we start to see more moving of the needle? Because I know over the years, just in my experience of working in the field historically, it's like, oh, we're going to do all these things, and we just haven't seen that movement. But even in recent times, I am seeing people are getting closer to that outcome. Does anyone have any commentary on that?
We've got a little bit to add. I think there is actually good collaboration between government and industry, and it's about, you're never going to be able to stop them, right? They're just going to keep changing their trade craft, the attack surface increases. So how about you just remove the objective utility of the information or the impact? So if we can move off all this hoarding of personal information, which has been legislated for organisations that come in under AML/CTF, so if we can update that legislation and remove that, if we can then onboard private enterprise digital identity solutions and rely on that, that means we're reducing the amount of PI that we're collecting.
Sure.
But organisations are working with ASD and other readiness entities to kind of improve their response fitness. So if they do have an incident, they've got a plan in place, they know what they need to do, they have viable backups, they know that they're viable backups, they restored the backups before, then that's going to get better as well, right? So I think there is movement, definitely. The needle's shifting, right? We're not going to get there straight away. It might take another couple of years until we offload all this PI that we don't need. We move away from relying on that, and then organisations, it's just the norm that you do once a year, twice a year, 3 times a year, an incident response plan or simulation.
I think, yes. I'm just trying to think what to actually add that's actually different to what you said. Like,
well, the information sharing, right?
Yeah, true. Information sharing, passage of information sharing is critical for anybody to respond. I think in my session I talked about how it takes it's not individuals who respond, it's a village to respond to incidents, and the passage of information quickly, collaboration quickly is core to making that happen, both with government, so that we can fill some gaps that you might have, hopefully fill some gaps that you might have in regards to your investigation and recovery process, but also again back to like your supply chains and the people who need to you, or interdependencies that you have. Pass that information out to them. So one, they're assured that you're actually doing something about it as well. And two, they know you're doing something. They know you care about them, and you're doing everything you can to recover.
Look at you two guys gloat about all these great initiatives that are coming out. In New Zealand, I do feel we lack some of these frameworks. I don't think the intelligence is there, or not even understanding that, these things should be done. It's just with the smaller economy, every single standard you put on business just makes it more and more challenging for them. And it is just hard. What I would love to see is just those minimum standards start to rise, and we bring the low tide up a little bit, because as a lawyer, on one hand, all these frameworks and standards we have in place, we can just dance around them. They're super easy. But then from an idealistic, taking a step back, what I actually want to see is some great initiative, but then I appreciate, the powers that be do have a bit of a balancing exercise there as well.
So I want to move on now to, if you look at things like GDPR, CCPA or California Consumer Privacy Act, NDB, Notifiable Data Breach Scheme and so on, where is the government sort of falling short, or perhaps where can they really double down on those steps to support businesses?
If we're just talking about like those core privacy legislations, looking at Australia, the exceptions, there, the small business exemption and things like that, is just so off market and so off brand compared to the rest of the world and compared to Australia's trading partners. It's also an old clunky piece of legislation. You've got credit reporting and things like that in there. Like there are things that should be revised, and there's, from an outsider's perspective, I've heard a lot of talk about the reforms, but they just come across clunky, no set timeframes and issues like that. So I guess that's from a pure legislative viewpoint.
I think further to that, to the clunkiness and the outdatedness there, like the world's changed, and even like the tax file numbers, right? Like I think it needs to be a little bit more nimble. Maybe some of these bits come into the regs instead of the legislation itself, and those regs are updated more frequently. And so as systems change, as threats change, etc., that they can be updated to be more timely, right? Like the NDP coming in 2018 or 19 when we're 2026 now. And, we've had one reform to the Act and it was tranche one, and it's only a small number of the total recommendations that was accepted by the government for that Act. So that says to me, I think streamline the legislation piece, move the variables into the regulations so they can be changed, and then like get the guidance down pat for small businesses. Like we love our lawyers, but like that you don't have the money to have a general counsel, a CISO, a CIO, everything else. And so if the exemptions are going to go, we're going to have to support those those smaller businesses to comply with the Act. But then if they can't afford the response, how can they work through it to be compliant?
So before moving to you, Michael, just staying with you for a moment, James, industry always tells me that it's like very convoluted. Right? It's like big document. How do I read it? How do I get around it? Where do I start? And to your point before, like SMBs don't have capital to be able to do this. So and majority of our market in Australia is small to medium-sized businesses. So what's going to happen there?
What's going to happen? What I'd like to happen? I mean, it'd be amazing if we could have a green slip, pink slip for businesses like what we do for motor vehicles here in Australia. I wouldn't say it goes on every business, but if you're operating where you're in critical infrastructure or the supply chain that has a risk, or you deal with a lot of personal information, then you have to have insurance. And to get insurance, you need to get the pink slip. So you need to tick off that you've got some controls, whether that's essentially whatever that looks like. And to Anthony's earlier point about all boats rise with the tide, like then that kind of brings it up the standards of the businesses that are operating, gives them that kind of comfort. If it does go wrong, then they've got insurance to kind of come in and bring those experts to help respond to the incident. So I mean that's what I'd love to see.
Yeah, and I think, pointing out the GDPR, that's criticised a lot for being a code, very prescriptive on what organisations need to do. So if you have a supplier, you have to have these contractual arrangements in place. Now that can be quite annoying for a large business, that being told what to do essentially, but for a small business that doesn't have a lawyer, that's brilliant. All of a sudden, you're no longer negotiating these things. This has to be done, and that's the way it is. And so there's a balance there between having these principles-based regime where lawyers have a field day because you can interpret things, and balanced against where you're actually told what to do, what that standard is, and sets the expectations, and you can go from there and negotiate other aspects of the contract.
Michael, what are your sentiments?
I actually think a lot of the points you raised are really good, and like the small business things and setting the minimum standards. So like I guess ASD, we have like the Essential 8 that's out there. And there's feedback. It's like it actually does cost a lot of money to actually get to that top level maturity there. So like the feedback we heard, and I think some of the work that's going on is how can we actually tailor this for some of those smaller businesses? Because like you said, Australia, we have a lot of them in here. So how can we actually tailor it so it's actually easy for them to implement to help them protect themselves from these incidents?
Yeah, and also just looking at these legislations, thinking about things in real world today. Something that really stands out in the New Zealand regime is you can apologise now when you do a Privacy Act notification. You can say, I apologise for this incident without prejudicing yourself or creating a claim. And that's just that's so sweet, that's so Kiwi, right? But it just creates a bit of a soft point and touches on the reality. Look, we are sorry we did this, and we can be upfront. Without, in other regimes, you just have to dance around it and say, we regress and things like that, and just understanding the world that we now operate in, these things happen, and let's, change the tone of the language that we're using.
And lastly, maybe one quick key takeaway from all of you today before we wrap up. So maybe Michael, will start with you.
One quick key takeaway. Probably collaboration and open collaboration, like quick sharing amongst not just us, government, but everybody. Again, takes a village to respond to something.
I'd say kind of looking further afield. Or, it's good, like we're here in Australia, we're 12,000 or 17,000 kilometres away from others, and we feel like we're a little island, because we are a big island and isolated, but like the harms that are flowing from some of the events overseas are going to come and land on us, and so we need to keep abreast of that. And then, for boards in particular, like note those risks and how they can mitigate them. Now, they don't need to go, too deep down, but just being realistic about there are some risks. How do we measure them and how do we mitigate those?
A key takeaway for me is in Australia, I think you should be really proud of the initiatives that are being made. Not everything's perfect, of course, but you're moving in the right direction, and I just can't wait for that to translate into New Zealand, because we watch and observe, and we don't have to do it twice. We can just see how you guys do it and copy paste.
Gentlemen, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And there you have it. This is KB on the Go. Stay tuned for more.